We've all been there. We put a date on the calendar, photography day trip. You do some research, you make plans, maybe let your hopes get up, but then the day comes and the weather just isn't cooperating. No clouds, just a day of full, harsh sun. As a landscape photographer, what do you do? How do you adjust? Like I said, we've all been there and we will all be there again. So today I'm going to offer just a few ideas on how to make great photos even under a cloudless sky. If you're new here, my name is John Pattison and I'm a photographer, but I'm also a writer and I'm the community builder for a national nonprofit. I am not a full-time photographer and I have a family. And so I am often putting photography day trips on the calendar weeks in advance. Multi-day trips, forget about it. When they happen at all, they are scheduled months ahead of time. So when the day finally arrives, I am unlikely to be able to reschedule if the conditions are not in my favor. And that happened recently when I made plans to spend the day at the Oregon coast, specifically the central Oregon coast around Newport. What I was hoping for was fog, dramatic weather, giving way to a beautiful sunset. It's a photographer's dream. I even had a subject in mind for that sunset shot. It was going to be the Yaquina Bay Lighthouse. There's nothing wrong with hopeful thinking, but today I want to use some of my bad luck as a case study for some of the options that photographers, especially landscape photographers, have when the clouds don't materialize as we had hoped. The first thing that we can do is one that I chose not to do, and that is to just change locations. I did check to see if there were other locations on the central coast where the conditions were most favorable, but it was all pretty much the same. What I didn't do, what I chose not to do, was to look in another direction entirely. For weeks I had all of this momentum toward Newport. Maybe I should have changed course and looked east toward Central Oregon or north to the Columbia River Gorge. But of course, sometimes it's not possible to call an audible and change directions. But in this case, I could have. I did have quite a bit of flexibility. I had an entire day. So do I regret not checking the weather at Smith Rock or Crown Point? Honestly, yeah, maybe a little, but I didn't, and that's where some of these other tips came in for me. The second tip for shooting landscape photography is to get out early and to stay late. The light is softer and often more colorful at sunrise and sunset, even if the skies stay clear. I left home around 4:30 a.m., probably should have left closer to 4. I did get to a nice location, the Yaquina Bay Bridge, just as the sun was coming up, but I totally rushed my composition. Still, I think the color of the sky here was very nice, and I do like the sun star that you can see through the legs of the bridge. At the end of the day, the marine layer was just starting to come in, and I got a photo of the lighthouse from a distant pullout several miles up Highway 101. Not a great shot, frankly. So, in summary, even if the day stays cloudless, the quality of light at the edges of the day can still be quite lovely. Okay, so now with the sun fully up, I went to the Yaquina Head Lighthouse, which is really a lovely lighthouse. This was actually the second trip that I had planned specifically to photograph an Oregon lighthouse, and both times there wasn't a cloud in the sky. You can see the first one in the image behind me. This is a photograph I took of the Yaquina Head Lighthouse. The way I adapted in Newport is actually one of my favorite tips. Instead of fighting the bright sun, lean into it by overexposing and creating a bright, airy feeling. I was careful to not lose the highlights when I was exposing, and I actually liked how some of these turned out. It's a vibe, as the kids may or may not actually say. Another strategy for dealing with a full sun day is one I used extensively in Newport, and that is to shoot in black and white. I was still shooting in RAW so that I had options later, but I did switch my camera's preview mode to black and white, and so now I was composing not for color, but for contrast, shapes, and shadows. One of the keys here is to look for scenes with strong light and dark contrast. I started with the lighthouse, and I really liked the contrast and the textures here. Below the lighthouse, there were some seals that were lazing on the shore, occasionally getting lifted up and moved by waves. Other seals were swimming among the rocks. My favorite photo of a seal is probably this one for the dramatic contrast between the light and the dark. You'll see more black and white images with my next few strategies for shooting landscape photography on a cloudless day. My next one is to look for patterns, textures, and details. The harsh sun emphasizes texture, so use that to your advantage. I started looking for patterns, first in this abstract of some dried brush, and then in the stones below the lighthouse that lead down to the beach. Another approach on a day when the conditions aren't cooperating is to treat it as a scouting trip. Not every outing can produce a portfolio-worthy shot. Building our knowledge of a location leads to better opportunities down the line, and we can use these less than optimal days as opportunities for research, marking good spots for a return visit under different conditions. We can take note of angles and features and the direction of light. And of course, we can take reference shots of compositions that we like. And I did do some scouting on this trip. I drove from Newport about 30 miles south to a place called Thor's Well. Thor's Well it's like a hole in the coastline. It's supposedly about 20 feet deep, and it looks like it drains the ocean. And this is a place that I've wanted to visit since seeing Nick Page's truly epic sunset photo from this site. But I'd never been there myself. I didn't know how busy it is. I didn't know where to park. I didn't know what it takes to get that close to Thor's Well. And I'll be honest with you, Thor's Well freaked me out. As someone who is from Oregon, who grew up visiting the coast and whose parents both grew up in Bandon on the South Oregon coast, I like to think that I have a healthy respect for the raw power of the Pacific Ocean. I once even rescued a girl who got out too far, couldn't find her footing, and was quickly overwhelmed by the waves. To get out to Thor's Well, there's a path of rocks, and I assume the path is natural, but I actually don't know. But you can walk along these rocks to get close to the edge. Still, I decided not to go all the way out on my own. I imagined myself getting hit with a sneaker wave. Best case scenario, I get soaked. Big deal. But my imagination kept coming up with much worse scenarios, including, being dragged out to sea or getting sucked into Thor's Well, where I would be shredded by the barnacles and my body slowly digested like Sarlacc in Star Wars for 1,000 years. And I decided that was the worst case scenario. So I kept my distance and I took photographs from a few different angles of people who were braver than me. And I do like how some of these turned out. I'm really happy I checked out Thor's Well. I will definitely go back, and I do plan on going all the way to the edge, but I'm going to make sure that someone else is with me, someone who can call for help, or at least someone who can rescue my SD card. 3 more strategies for shooting in the full sun, and I will make them quick so that this video doesn't get too much longer. One is to experiment with long exposures. Long exposures can add mystery and mood, transforming flat, harsh scenes into ethereal, flowing images. But this is a case of do as I say, not as I do, because I took only 2 long exposure shots using ND filters, and I am not happy with either result. When the sky is blank and the landscape itself is not giving you much to work with, another thing that we can do is we can shift our focus to the human presence in the place. Taking photographs of architecture, people, stories. People add a sense of narrative to the scene. Often people are loving the same weather conditions that we photographers are grumbling about. And you can photograph these stories from a distance with a long lens, picking out quiet gestures or moments of connection. Or you can get up close, as with this man that I met who was traveling around the country with his aging cat that he loves a lot. Okay, one last tip, and I'm talking to myself more than anyone else here, and that is to be grateful. I wanted some clouds, yes, but I also was able to spend something like 16 hours at the Oregon coast with my camera, which is a gift. So here's my encouragement to you and to myself. Don't waste too much time wishing for different conditions. Work with what you're given. Let the limitations teach you. Let them sharpen your eyes and your awareness. There's always something to see, and almost always something worth photographing if we can be present and patient enough to notice. And maybe, just maybe, the discipline of showing up with your camera on an imperfect day is what shapes you into the kind of photographer and really the kind of person who sees beauty and interest that others might walk right past. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.